Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. It was called Memento Mori. And as it begins, it is apparently Starfleet Remembrance Day, which is kind of like our Memorial Day. They wear like a little badge to remember people they've lost from different ships that they've served on. Also, as we begin the episode, we learn that Uhura is on an engineering rotation hanging out with Hemmer, I guess, to sort of learn more about engineering as part of her ongoing Starfleet education. The next thing that happens is the ship arrives at a colony on a planet where they're scheduled to deliver a kind of air filter machine thing that helps the atmosphere remain breathable. But they find the colony's satellite destroyed, as well as that a massacre has taken place at a very bloody scene. While they are in orbit, a lone ship approaches, and it turns out to be populated by refugees from the colony. And when they explain that their hull is transport resistant because they're a radioactive ore-carrying ship, the captain orders the deployment of a deep space transport tube, which I guess we've seen before on Discovery, if I'm not mistaken. But it cracks me up because, it's basically a docking thing that allows people to physically walk from one ship to another in space. And I can't help but think, that might have come in handy about 5,000 times on the original series. I mean, I can't remember for sure, but there must have been times when they were like, or in the movies where like transporters are down. What can we do? How about dock with the thing and stick out the little tube? I don't know. Anyway, these people on the ship explain that the colony was attacked, but there aren't any signs of any other ships in the area. Signs that ships are present, signs that ships were present. So it's kind of weird. As the colonists start boarding Enterprise, they start describing what happened to the colony, and Una and La'an start trying to put together a picture of what happened based on their descriptions. At this point, a child runs by them saying that the monsters are coming, and when she's questioned about what she saw, she says she didn't really see anything as much as hear it. And she describes the sound that was made by whoever attacked them. And this seems to remind La'an of something, at which point she urgently tells the bridge to scan for polarized EM signatures. And when they do this, they detect the signatures and determine that there's a hologram present. So something's hiding behind something. And when La'an hears this, she tells the bridge even more urgently to raise shields immediately. But when the captain tries to do this, he can't, because the shields can't be raised while the tube is extended. And this left them completely open to attack. And I thought this scene was really well done, and they did a great job making it tense, and you feel the sense of urgency. And then when they're attacked, it's like, oh my word, because the shields are down, and wow, it's kind of bad. And I actually had freaking goosebumps, so it was really well done. So now the ship is damaged, and La'an insists that the ship cannot stand fight or, stand its ground, and that it has to retreat and regroup because the enemy, who she believes is the Gorn, or are the Gorn, will just wear them down. And after saying that it may not in fact be them, because no one has ever seen them, certainly not in a long time, the captain takes her advice. Una, who was wounded in the attack, is on her way to sickbay, so La'an is made acting number 1. And the ship goes to hide in the Mutara within a brown dwarf nearby, at the center of which is a very dense singularity, necessitating that the ship shut down all its systems. Because, with all its lights on and systems going, the enemy will be able to detect them. This presents various problems, among which are sickbay being short on needed supplies that they can't replicate, which they need to help the wounded, as well as the ship being down to 1 torpedo that because of the attack. Spock then develops a way to track the ship, which they are now treating as a Gorn ship, so that they can manually drop the remaining torpedo on them. But when they do this and successfully destroy one of the Gorn ships, they realize that the Gorn have sacrificed this one ship deliberately just so they could get a bead on where Enterprise is. After which, multiple Gorn ships arrive, including a gigantic starship. Enterprise then risks implosion by diving deeper into the dwarf in order to evade the Gorn, because the closer they get to the singularity, it's like a submarine that goes too deep underwater, or anything that goes too deep underwater. At a certain point, it reaches what's called a crush depth, and the pressure just crushes it. So in this case, it would be kind of a similar thing, that they would be near such a dense gravity well that it would crush the ship. Down in engineering, where like parts of the ceiling apparently caved in during the attack and whatnot, Uhura and a wounded Hemmer are trying to keep the air filter device that they were transporting from exploding and destroying the ship, because apparently it's got some components that aren't all that dissimilar from a nuclear reactor. And if it goes, the whole ship's going to go up, and they have to keep the rods cool and stuff like that. Very similar to like a nuclear meltdown is happening. Something very similar to nuclear meltdown is happening within this device, and they have to keep it from going nuclear. Next, we see a Gorn ship crush itself in its pursuit of Enterprise by going too close to the singularity to try to find them. And it turns out that Enterprise is slowly being sucked into that singularity also. And it doesn't have long before it won't be able to escape the pull. So La'an volunteers along with Spock to take a shuttle to do some reconnaissance, because with all the systems shut down and with the effects of the gas cloud on the ship, they don't have like long range communication, so they can't send a probe because they wouldn't be able to get the telemetry. And they're trying to figure out, where the other ships are, and they need tactical information. So Pike says, okay, that's a good idea. Take the Galileo, which is awesome because of course we all know the Galileo shuttlecraft. On the shuttle, at her request, Spock performs a mind meld on La'an to try to help her remember information from when her colony was attacked by the Gorn, so that she might be able to give the Enterprise information to help them not get destroyed. As they're doing this, she begins to remember being held on a Gorn breeding planet, and Spock also begins to remember Michael, because she lost people and he lost, quote unquote, lost someone, and it brings it up for him. And while it's happening, La'an begins to sense this memory, and he shuts it down because obviously her existence is classified. After the mind meld, Spock and La'an modify the phasers to use them against the Gorn effectively and destroy one of the ships. So I guess there's only one left at this point. Back in engineering, Hemmer, or in the cargo bay, I guess it wasn't engineering, Hemmer realizes that to prevent the destruction of Enterprise, they have to vent the cargo bay into space, because it's the stuff they've been trying to do to keep it from exploding isn't working, and they have to just get it off the ship. And of course, to vent the cargo bay means to expose it to the vacuum of space, which would blow everything out of the cargo bay, including himself and Uhura. Back on the bridge, the captain decides to use the gravity of the black hole to slingshot the Enterprise out of the brown dwarf while simultaneously venting the cargo hold, so that the exploding filter, once it gets blown out, will trick the Gorn ship into thinking that Enterprise was destroyed when it, blows up, and as a result, move off, which necessitates Hemmer and Uhura putting on EV suits and strapping themselves down to the floor, which is something that we saw in one of the previews. I think the trailer before the show aired, and I was like, what the heck is going on? But this explains that, what that was. And it was interesting because Hemmer was able to put the helmet on despite the fact that he has these large antennae. So where do they go? Do they retract? Do they fold forward or backwards? Like what does he do with them to put on the helmet? So anyway, they do this, and it does in fact work. The Enterprise is kind of obscured because they go really close to the singularity, and you can, parts of the ship do in fact get damaged and crushed, and they lose a few crew members, and you can sort of hear it like being crushed or, being impacted by the pressure. But they managed to convince the giant Gorn starship that they were destroyed, and it moves off because all it wanted was the ship, the people. So the Enterprise then does slingshot itself out of the brown dwarf, and the day is saved, as it were, although the Enterprise is severely damaged. And that's pretty much it. And I thought this was an excellent episode. There were great scenes with La'an and Pike and La'an and Una. The banter with, or sequences of dialogue between Pike and the bridge crew was very well done. It very much felt like Star Trek. I'm really beginning to like Ortegas. She's awesome, I think, and I'm glad they came up with this character. She's really good. We had, again, different log entries from someone other than the captain or the first officer in this episode. La'an bookended the episode with her log entries, and I thought that was cool. I wouldn't necessarily want to see, log entries from every random ensign on the ship, but, having Uhura's log, I think at one point was cool. I think we had that, because it's Uhura. And the bridge crew logs being included in the episode, I think, is pretty cool because, all these officers probably have logs. It's just a question of whose they would write into the, the show. But I think it's cool to see the episodes sort of from the points of view of different officers rather than always the captain. In this episode, interestingly, Dr. M'Benga says his own name. He says M'Benga out. And he says M'Benga, not M'Benga. And so I have been right all along, apparently, that his name is M'Benga, not M'Benga, despite the fact that Una called him M'Benga last week. And I thought, oh, I've been saying it wrong. It's M'Benga, not M'Benga, but it is in fact M'Benga, not M'Benga. So I'm glad we finally have that straightened out. The character said his own damn name, so now we know it's M'Benga, as I always thought it was. But yeah, this episode was really, really good. I totally got Balance of Terror vibes from this episode, which I'm sure was intentional, and I think that's very cool. This episode was very much, Wrath of Khan, right? Because the whole space battle in the Mutara Nebula that occurs in that film is sort of reproduced here. And, it's a cool sequence in the film, so it was cool in this episode. At the same time, I thought it was very Hunt for the Red October and, very other films of that nature where you've got a submarine, and it's playing cat and mouse with the enemy and they're nearing crush depth and all that stuff. So I thought it was very cool. You can look at that and say, oh, it's derivative, they're copying it, they're not being original, but, there's going to be a certain amount of that in every show or movie or whatever, because, first of all, there are only so many original ideas, right? You have to sort of repeat themes. And, there are situations that people find themselves in all the time that different entities are going to want to explore in their own way. So this show incorporated these elements that we've seen before into this episode, but it was about much more than that. It was about, exploring the La'an character. It was about showing us what this crew is capable of. And it was also about sort of reintroducing us to the Gorn, and it sets them up as very formidable, which I don't remember having been done with them before. They showed up in Enterprise. They, of course, were in the original series, but a really good picture of the Gorn is painted here. And it was just chilling, I thought. So I really enjoyed it. And the cool thing is that part of that was, the building a mythos around them, because they're treated very much like an entity that were regarded in universe as almost mythical, because the people who had like seen them in person almost always didn't survive. So anyone living who had any sort of encounter with them hadn't even seen them in most cases. So they were very much like boogeymen. And that not only makes them cool and ominous and scary, but it makes episodes like this fit into canon. Maybe not perfectly, but when they say in the original series episode that the Gorn are in, that it's the first encounter, it's not a complete plot hole, because they're keeping them sort of out of sight here. And so it fits in. It wouldn't have fit in if they encountered them in person and they had fisticuffs with them, or close quarters combat, with phasers or whatever. It would have been like, okay, how can they possibly say it's the first contact in the original series? But they sort of kept them out of it, and kept them sort of at a distance and just kind of like there but not seen. I thought it was handled very well. Now, I don't remember how their appearance was handled in Enterprise. I know that the audience got to see them, but I don't remember if the crew sees them and whether they survive if they do. So, whoever did see them. So how it fits in with Enterprise, I don't know, but I thought that they did a good job. They didn't further screw up the continuity by having the Gorn on screen as individuals. They just had the ships. So I thought that I was satisfied that they didn't further goof up the continuity of, Star Trek vis-a-vis the Gorn with this episode. So I was very glad for that. It worked very well story-wise, and it actually, arguably fits in with the canon rather than contradicting it. So I thought that was very cool. This was just a really great episode. As I said, there were other scenes in sick bay that I didn't really cover in my description of the plot that were well done, which added to the tension of the episode. And, this version of Nurse Chapel continues to be very funny and very cool, even though she's completely different than the original series. Nurse Chapel, I really like the character so far. I hope they end up doing more with her and really get into her, story. I hope we get to see her do something more than just have the occasional one-liners. That would be very cool. There were scenes, as I said, in the cargo bay with Uhura and Hemmer, and I thought that stuff was good. We learn a little bit more about Hemmer's personality, and that is very good. It's this is the kind of work they didn't do and haven't really been doing on Discovery, which kind of lends itself to Discovery being not good, where this show is very good. I really like this episode, and I'm looking forward to next week. For now, I'm going to take off. I'll be back when the next episode is released. Until then, I wish you peace and long life.